Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Now you may have noticed on Friday I did not upload a video. My original plan for Friday was to upload a World Cup preview video, but two things ended up being the reason why I didn't. One was that I was pretty busy. I had to get some stuff done before I could record. But the other thing is, and the bigger thing was, I felt like it wasn't really necessary. I felt like the thing that people would want more just to focus on BlizzCon. I figured people would just watch BlizzCon anyway. And the World Cup's the World Cup. And I'm glad I didn't, because my predictions would have been wrong. So, it is what it is. But today, we're still going to talk about the World Cup. We're going to talk about a post-World Cup thing, which is always my plan. And today, I want to go through some of these teams and talk about them, how I was impressed by them, if I was impressed by them, of course, and do all that stuff. So, to start, of course, let's talk about the top 4 teams. You know what? Top 6. Remember the top 6. Now, if you did not watch any of the World Cup's matches on Saturday, boy, did you miss out on some history. For the first time ever, South Korea did not win the Overwatch World Cup. First time ever. South Korea got 3rd place. China got 2nd place, and the United States got 1st place. First time ever that the US has ever managed to get 1st place here. First time they've even managed to even make it to the semifinals, and of course also first time ever to make it to the finals. Team USA played amazing. They were very, very good. They lost 0 maps in the group stages. They lost 1 map in the elimination bracket, and it was to South Korea. They also tied or drew 1 map against South Korea. So it wasn't a perfect, win every map, but it was a very, very good job, and they did very, very well. Sinatra got, of course, the MVP for the World Cup, though. I did vote for Sinatra because I thought Sinatra played absolutely incredibly. Just from what I watched, I just was like, dang, this is really, really good. But Corey also could have gotten it. I think anybody on that team could have gotten it. It was they were so good. Like, they were genuinely the best team at the World Cup. And it was quite the win for them. And of course, they're all Overwatch League talent, so you're not going to really see much from them going forward into contenders. Same goes with China and South Korea. Those teams are also completely made up of Overwatch League players, so you're not going to see a whole lot there. I didn't get to watch a lot of China. I only got to see China's semifinals and match against the US in the finals. So I didn't watch a lot of China, but China looked like what I'd expect from China. China was a lot of Chengdu Hunters players with the addition of Gushui and Eileen. Like, that was their roster. That was the entirety of their roster. Gushui, Eileen, Chengdu Hunters the rest of the way. So you had Jinmu, you had Elsa, you had Yveltal, and you had Kill. So I thought China looked pretty good against France. They looked like the USA just had their number, though. But they look like what you'd expect from them. They're going to run a lot of Pharah. They're not going to run a lot of the Doomfist Reaper if they don't have to. That was really what I kind of got from watching them. South Korea didn't look as strong as we've seen them in the past, though they still looked very, very good. I don't think this was the best South Korean team we ever saw. I think that's just kind of the way South Korea is at this point in time. A lot of the players who have won don't really care as much. They want to focus on the Overwatch League because there's a lot more at stake with the Overwatch League, right? But being able to represent your team, of course, is a big thing, right? And you look at the U.S. Like, the U.S. wanted to win, right? They had never won the World Cup. It was something that they felt super, super strongly and super, like, a lot of pride in. The fact that we have this, we are the U.S. and we've never won the World Cup. We've never been able to say the U.S. is on the top, right? San Francisco Shock, of course, win the Overwatch League Grand Finals with a lot of Korean players on the roster, but also with Sinatra and Moth and Super. That's kind of the guiding light for that team, right? They're kind of the most important parts of that roster. Obviously, Smurf played a lot more in the playoffs, but still a really good match for them. Where South Korea, it's still a thing of pride for them, but not to the same degree as I think it is for South Korea. Or to the same way it was for the U.S. this time around, because the U.S. like had never won, South Korea had always won, so it was kind of a thing where players like Jonak or Fury or Twilight or DM probably look and say, I don't really need to do this. And they want to focus on the Overwatch League, which is much more important. That's more of their careers, and they get more money. The fourth place team was France. And France is the first team I really want to highlight, just based on how well they played overall. France as a team, they were supposed to have Poco on the roster, but the problem was that he got sick, I believe, and couldn't play anymore, so they had to replace him with Tech36, who is a Contenders player for Samsung Morning Stars. And let me tell you right now, this team was good. France was the first team to beat South Korea. They beat them in the group stages. First team ever to beat South Korea at a World Cup. France looked really, really good. And I think it was on the backs of a player who I think deserves a shot in the Overwatch League. What team? I'm not positive. But definitely deserves a shot, and that is Leaf. He is a damage player, currently with Team Giganti, but right after the World Cup ended, he tweeted out that he was looking for team for Owl. And, you know, the World Cup is a big place for Overwatch League talent to emerge from. Obviously, last year we saw Fusions emerge from the World Cup, and in a lot of ways we saw Gushui emerge from the World Cup. I don't know if Gushui would have ended up on one of the Chinese teams without the World Cup. He probably would have, but I think the World Cup really is the reason why a team like Hangzhou would have gone after him, because obviously their roster was mostly Korean, but they went after Gushui to have a Chinese main tank who is one of the best main tanks in the world, and he's really, really good. Leaf, though, looked very good throughout his time in the World Cup. I mean, he was killing it on Pharah. He was a really good Pharah. And Doomfist, I mean, he was doing it on everything. He's a player that I would not be surprised if he made it up into the Overwatch League. I thought Tech36 and Chubbs were pretty good. I thought FDR was pretty good. Then, of course, Soon and Hip are Overwatch League players. Then there was Hardest, who is not currently on any team, but he was recently on Revival. Now, he's 26, he's an older player, so there's a chance that he's not someone who goes into the Overwatch League. And look, there's a good possibility that none of these players go into the Overwatch League, but I think it would be good to see some of these players get a chance, at least in a Overwatch League Academy team. But France was a pretty good team, and I thought Leaf was the big guy there. 5 and 6 teams were Denmark and the Netherlands. Denmark lost to South Korea it was a 3-0 win that took 6 maps. Or 5 maps. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it must have been 5 maps. It was a 3-0 win in 5 maps. Like, it was, Team Denmark played very, 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 very well. They looked really good. So they did a good job. And of course, this is a team that has 2 players who are Overwatch League, or at least were at one point Overwatch League players, in Shax and Kellex. But the other players they had some of them are in academy teams. You have Scalar, who's on Uprising Academy. I don't know how recently he was put on Uprising Academy. I don't know if he's been there for a while or not. Yeah, he's been there since June, so there's a chance that he gets promoted, but we haven't seen anything yet about that. But the other thing is, you know, they had some. I think Fisher was a very good player for them. I thought Henningsen was pretty good, and Molf was pretty good. This is a team that I thought was solid. I didn't expect them to do as well as they did. But I wouldn't say that they had a player that I'm like, this player needs to be in the Overwatch League, though they were very, very good. Team Netherlands, on the other hand, was my biggest surprise of any team in the Overwatch League. Visility was absolutely insane. Now, Visility's already on the Montreal Rebellion, so he's already kind of in that next step before potentially getting into the Overwatch League. He was incredible. He needs to be on an Overwatch League roster, or at the worst, needs to be on an Overwatch League Academy team, because, oh my, He was incredible. And I think a team like Boston Uprising or a team like the Toronto Defiant have a lot of DPS players we already know about. But a team like the Boston Uprising, who right now don't look like they have much in the way of DPS players, they could use a player like Visility. I mean, he was so good during the World Cup. I would be surprised if he doesn't get Overwatch League looks. But the problem is, of course, there's only so long between now and when the season starts, or now and when like the teams that have rosters decided. So it's just kind of like, what are they gonna do? But I think that Visility is a player that definitely deserves to be on a roster. So that was your top 6. You of course then also had your other teams in the group stages. In Sweden, you had Russia, the UK, and Canada. UK and Canada were the biggest disappointments, I would say, of the entire World Cup. They didn't win a single match. I don't even know if they won. I mean, I think the UK won a map. I don't know if Canada won a single map the entire World Cup. They weren't very good, which I think hurts some of the stocks or some of these players like Smex, KSP, and Crimzo. Those are the kinds of players who you'd see get a little bit of a hit potentially, and even Bonnie possibly, in terms of trying to find a team in free agency. And Note are already under contract with teams. Surefour is rumored to be under contract with the team. Nothing would, a bad World Cup performance wouldn't hurt Surefour's chances of getting to an Overwatch League team, though. The UK, definitely the interesting. I mean, Canada's more interesting than the UK, but the UK, they looked very good in the throughout the group stages, or the preliminary rounds, but they just couldn't get it going. But once again, a lot of their, Kib is the kind of player who maybe has a problem signing with a team. Now that he's, the last thing he did was pretty underwhelming. But I think the UK, their struggles were very interesting. I did not see them coming. To end talking about kind of players and teams that I was really kind of impressed with, after this, in Sweden, we had some players who maybe end up some places, I don't know though, and Russia had a couple of Overwatch League players. I didn't really watch a lot of Russia or Sweden, so I can't say for sure how I feel about them as a whole. I didn't really watch a lot of them, so that's really where I'm at with them. It's tough to really say when you don't really watch the teams a lot, but those are some of the teams that unfortunately didn't get to watch a lot because I was focusing on some of the other matches. But I want to talk about some of the preliminaries teams, some teams that didn't move on in the preliminaries that actually played pretty well and surprised me in the way that they played. And if you look at the list, you can see like where teams finished and whatnot. One of the teams that I was really, really impressed by, despite their loss, and maybe it wasn't enough to warrant them being a team that has a bunch of Overwatch League players, but it was Japan. Japan lost to Italy 3-2, who then Italy lost to Sweden, and Sweden moved into the elimination round. But I really thought Japan was a really, really, really solid team, and it was 10 that I thought was really interesting and really impressive. 10 and Tayo, who were the two main DPS players for this team, really impressed me. Now, 10 had some issues that I noticed, some things that I thought 10 was doing that were a little too aggressive, a little too problematic. He was going in, he would kind of dive in on that Doomfist a little too far and get picked off, which of course is the kind of thing you go, hey, you gotta stop doing that, please. But I thought it was a pretty good performance from Japan despite their loss. Now, I think the problem with Japan as a region and with people trying to sign players in Japan is that obviously Japanese is its own language, and if you sign a bunch of Japanese players, you need to build, if you want a Japanese player in a mixed roster, they would have to be a very good player who can speak English. Now, there are some Japanese players or players who are on Team Japan that speak English. I know, why can't I think of his name? Haku speaks English. There's somebody else I saw an interview with who was speaking English. I don't remember who it was. But Haku's on XL2, so he speaks English. But this is a team that was really interesting, and a lot of these players come from the contenders team. Green Leaves, Hashimi comes from Green Leaves, Ten comes from Green Leaves, Zerafi comes from Green Leaves, their head coach UK came from Green Leaves. It's an interesting team. They obviously didn't perform as well as they could have, and there were obvious mistakes that they made. But I thought Japan played really well, and they really surprised me. When they're not a team that you really think of in the Overwatch scene, but they played pretty well, and it surprised me. Norway played pretty well, I thought, for a little while. They beat Spain in a pretty easy match. Unfortunately, Ireland, I was really pulling for them, but they didn't play very well. So, is what it is. A couple teams that did surprise me. Saudi Arabia beat Portugal 3-1. Did not see that one coming. That one was a huge surprise to me. Germany played pretty well before they had to play Russia, unfortunately for them. Russia's just a very good team. But, a lot of the preliminary teams, if it wasn't, one of the big regions, and it was probably Denmark beat Australia, which was a huge win for them. New Zealand played very well against Australia. There was a lot of really good teams that played in the preliminaries. They just couldn't make it to the end, but you would have loved to see them. Overall, I was very impressed with this World Cup. I thought there was a lot of really good teams that played. I was really impressed by what I saw throughout this entire World Cup. I was really impressed. I enjoyed it a lot. There weren't as many players that I was super impressed by this year as say last year. I thought last year Fusions was incredible last year. But I think that's because last year, right, you didn't have as many players in the Overwatch League. A lot fewer players in the Overwatch League last year. It was significantly fewer, just because you only had 12 teams, and you have 20 teams come in, but you also have 12 teams where 5 or 6 or 7 of those teams were completely redoing their rosters because they had horrible rosters the season before. So we're not seeing that as much this year. We're seeing that to a degree, but a lot of the teams already started making their moves. Team like the Valiant has already said, here's who we're going with, and then teams like the Boston Uprising and the Toronto Defiant have kind of started to define their roster already. So we're seeing stuff. We're seeing how things are changing, and I don't think there were as many players this time around that I think are going to be very obvious players to join the Overwatch League, but there's a lot of really good ones. What I will say though, if there is some stuff I'd like to see have an impact on the Overwatch League, I think we need some more casting teams, and there were some amazing casting teams. Lemon Kiwi and Jake were so good. They played off each other very well. Lemon Kiwi got very excited. Jake got very excited. You have that kind of very good just play-by-play commentator, and Lemon Kiwi who knew what she was talking about, who did a very good job. You had Jake, who of course is a pro player, and a very good pro player, someone who is well known, who is a person who is recognizable, and he's very knowledgeable of the game. He had very good insight onto what was going on. I really enjoyed them. Of course, you had Uber and Mr. X. You know what you're getting with those two. You had Jaws and Leg Day, who of course have been around for a while. They did World Cup last year. I think they're very good. They weren't my favorite group. They were probably my least favorite of the groups, but I thought they were still good. There's no bad groups, but they were probably my least favorite. They are what they are. They're not anything new, unlike Lemon, Kiwi, and Jake, who are not a normal casting duo. Of course, you have Avast and ZP. You can't go wrong with Avast. He's just such a weirdo. Never forget when he showed up on stage and kidnapped Reinforced dressed in a Chuck E. Cheese costume. And then you had Brennan Sideshow doing some casting, and I love Brennan Sideshow, so I'll never complain about them. But yeah, I thought World Cup was really good. There was definitely some players I thought shined, and of course Team USA walked with the gold, which made me happy because that is my country. So I was very excited about that. That's everything I'm going to cover for this episode. Like I said, I don't expect a ton of Overwatch League talent to come out of the World Cup this year, which is unfortunate. I think it's always nice when there is World Cup players that perform well and make it into the Overwatch League, but it's definitely possible. A lot of good players, and I think a lot of good regions and a lot of countries that show that they aren't, they're very good and they shouldn't be kind of just slept on. I thought Europe came very well to the World Cup, even if they didn't get top 3. I thought Europe really looked good and showed that they are a good region and they are something that's really, really good to look at. But if you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. And let me know down below your thoughts on the World Cup. If there's any players that you were impressed by that I didn't mention, ideally ones that are contenders players, but anyone really will do. But I'm going to get out of here. So thank you once again for watching. You all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.